leaving just enough, why we need a capabilities-based approach to measuring poverty in the United States of America.
Poverty, the state of lacking capabilities due to income inadequacy, should be measured using the supplemental poverty measure to derive capabilities.
What is poverty? Some might describe poverty as simply an income inadequacy, just not having enough money. However, Indian economist and philosopher Amartya Sen describes poverty as a lack of capabilities. He says the identification of minimally acceptable levels of certain basic capabilities, below which people count as being scandalously deprived, can provide a possible approach to poverty. Research fellow at the Heritage Foundation, Robert Rector, seems to describe poverty only as material deprivation. He says, to the average American, the word poverty implies significant material deprivation, an inability to provide a family with adequate nutritious food, reasonable shelter, and clothing. We would argue, however, that material deprivation is a symptom of poverty, not the definition of it. For our purposes, we will describe poverty as the overlap between lacking adequate income and lacking capabilities. What are capabilities? Capabilities are the entirety of what one is actually able to do or be, as opposed to functionings. Functionings are what one actually does.
American philosopher and law professor Martha Nussbaum outlines 10 central capabilities. Life, the ability to live. Bodily health, the ability to be free of sickness and have adequate access to health care. Play, the ability to laugh and enjoy oneself. Senses, imagination, and thought, the ability to learn and cultivate one's education. The rest are emotions, practical reason, affiliation, other species, bodily integrity, and control over one's environment.
Why do these matter in terms of poverty? This man chooses to live transiently. He wouldn't be described as being in poverty. A homeless child in North Korea does not choose this. This child is less likely to have access to adequate health care, a quality education, and the ability to control his environment. Therefore, we would consider this child to be in poverty. Accounting for capabilities is essential to understanding and accurately measuring poverty. Money that must be spent in order for one to have their central capabilities met should not be treated as discretionary spending. One cannot work toward a better life for his or herself unless he or she is able to afford transportation and healthcare. The way we currently measure poverty does not account for this.
How do we currently measure poverty in the United States of America? The U.S. uses what is called an absolute measure. An absolute measure is a set standard. The measure that we used is called the official poverty measure. The supplemental poverty measure is calculated differently. The poverty threshold takes the 33rd percentile of expenditures on food, clothing, shelter, and utility and multiplies this value by 1.2 to account for extra income to cover basic needs like household items. Household income takes the pre-tax gross income of a household and subtracts non-discretionary spending like childcare and taxes. It then adds in-kind benefits like subsidized housing and food stamps. There are many problems with the official poverty measure, which the supplemental poverty measure would solve. The official poverty measure only takes the gross before tax income and does not factor out non-discretionary spending, which is money that is not actually available to a family. The SPM, on the other hand, would subtract out non-discretionary spending and add in government assistance. Another problem with the official poverty measure is that the number only changes when it's adjusted for inflation. The supplemental poverty measure, on the other hand, would be recalculated every 5 years. Another advantage of the supplemental poverty measure is that it adjusts for geographical disparities in housing costs. Another advantage of the SPM is that it does not just count married individuals in a household, but cohabitors, which has become more prominent in recent years. Well, you may be wondering how this accounts for capabilities. When we factor out non-discretionary spending for things like transportation, childcare, and medical out-of-pocket costs, you are making sure households will have their central capabilities respected. You may be wondering why this all matters. We don't just study poverty because we like talking about dollars in pockets. Discussing poverty in the context of capabilities makes sure we are respecting the dignity of every person, and we do this because people matter. Just ask some of my friends. So why do we study poverty?
Because people matter.
People matter.
Maybe because most of us are way closer to being poor than to being rich. Like, in all likelihood, you're way more closer to like a homeless person than to someone who's rich and can afford all these things in life. And like, the sooner we realize that, the better off we'll all be. Because like, living in debt forever still isn't really like a good outcome for you. But like, we're all probably gonna end up doing that at some point. That is my final answer.
Okay, and you say people matter.
Savage! And also, implicitly, people do matter.